What's going on, YouTube? This thing's filthy right now. We just drove up to Boone, North Carolina to stay in a cabin with my in-laws, and we had just replaced the tie rods on this car. If you've seen my video about that, I had some issues with the steering. It was kind of jerking and shaking. The steering wheel was crooked whenever you gave it gas, and then it would straighten out when you let go. It wasn't right, but fixed that issue with the tie rods. Then on our way home from North Carolina, after driving all through the mountains, stopping and going pretty fast through some windy, hilly roads, I started to get some noise with acceleration, and also just kind of when you're going around a left-hand turn with more weight kind of on the right side, it was making kind of a whining noise. So I messed with it some, investigated, and I've got some serious grease slung all around this right side coming from my inner CV axle boot. CV axle boot has probably been ripped when my wife took this car through a flood and bumped into stuff and messed up the steering. She couldn't see where she was driving because there was like 2 feet of water, and obviously this is not, you know, a Jeep, even though she thinks it is sometimes. But messed up the CV axle. I think that's the problem. I'm gonna show you what it's doing and go through the steps of replacing it. Let me know if you have any questions. Here's an example of what this thing's doing on acceleration. Once you let off the gas, there's no more vibration or feedback in the steering wheel, but as soon as you accelerate again, you can hear it and feel it. It sounds like it's coming from the right front. And then when you're coasting, it drives fine. Kind of shaking everything inside the car. Might not be able to see it much, but you can definitely feel it and hear it shaking everything. So we can tell there's a problem because the steering wheel is shaking. The front end is just moving and making noise on acceleration. So once we get the car jacked up, there's a couple different things you want to check for. First off, you want to rock the tire top and bottom, grabbing it here and here, and checking for play in the wheel bearing. There's just done that, not seeing any play there. And then you also want to do from here and here, rocking back and forth to see if you have any play in your steering, which would be the tie rods, which I just did a video about that. This actually did have play there a few weeks ago, and we replaced those, fixed that, but you can see here we've got some grease that has been slung from this CV, and I've kind of seen this coming, that it may need to be replaced because that boot went bad and started slinging grease everywhere. Just drove it to North Carolina, and it is making all kinds of noise, and it's not happy now. So we're going to go ahead and address this CV. You can tell there's a little in and out. Play with it. We're going to go ahead and get the tire off and take a closer look at it. Once you get the tire off, you can see all this built up grease from the inner CV boot. You can see where it's torn, and it's been slinging grease for quite a while, and just without that lubrication in there and it being torn, getting grit in there, it's worn out, and you can kind of see the play there. I believe that amount of play is pretty normal, but with the torn boot, that's obviously slinging grease, and the vibration we're getting from this side, and the clicking at low speed when you're turning, I'm pretty confident that it is this CV. So I'm going to go ahead and replace it. It's best to replace it once these boots go bad anyway. So we're going to slap one in and see if that fixes our problem. Here's a look at the new CV axle I just picked up from O'Reilly's. Want to make sure it looks like it's the same length and style there, and you can see it's got the ABS little sensor there. The ABS, what it picks up as that spins. Everything looks good there. Looks like it's the same. We'll try to get it in there. So we're going to start with removing this brake caliper. I don't think there's quite enough hose to get this all the way out. So I'm going to take that off. It's an 18 millimeter. These two here and here. And then I'm going to get that out of the way. And then you got the ABS sensor wire is an 8 millimeter right there. Get it out of the way and loosen this bigger nut here. I haven't found out what size that is yet, but we'll get that all loosened out of the way, and then we're going to have to take off these two 18 millimeters to get the strut free so we can play with the knuckle and give enough room to get the axle out. So this axle nut here is 1.25 inches. So I'm going to start by getting that loose, and I've got this pry bar here wedged on the lug nuts so that I'm not fighting the transmission. I've also got it in neutral, and that's just holding it in place there. You can see I already broke it loose slightly, but that's a quick way to get that axle nut off without messing up your transmission by fighting it. Now I'm going to take this caliper off. I've turned the wheel some to make it easier to get to. But not quite enough. Alright, now I'm going to put that caliper up out of the way in a safe place so it's not going to put too much tension on that brake line. In this particular car, I found I can just kind of rest it on the tie rod there. Seems to do pretty well. We'll see about this time. And now everything's just chilling here, and I got plenty of room to move it around as much as I want once I get this out. So let's get the 18 on here. And then we'll get that ABS wire off before we forget about it. You just want to pull that sensor out of the way so it doesn't get damaged when we try to get this CV axle out, since it's got these teeth here and we're going to be pulling on everything. We don't want to pull the wire too tight, so we'll get that out of the way. Got the caliper out of the way. These are out. Now we just have to knock these bolts out and let this drop so we can start trying to get the axle out. So once we got these nuts off, I realized that the way we jacked this thing up today, it was putting weight on the lower control arms and was not going to let me get these bolts out without it all just collapsing because it was holding the weight of the car. So we had to move the jack back some, and I should have noticed that right from the get-go, but I didn't put them there. We just jacked it up, and I just let the guys at the shop here do it. But got it jacked properly now, so make sure you are not in your own way when you set up the jack. And you know, if you're doing this at home, use jack stands and everything. I'm also going to get this brake rotor out of the way just because it's already loose and it's just extra weight I'm going to be fighting. So now we've got this loose and these off. I'm just going to knock them out the rest of the way. Hopefully I can jiggle it out. If not, I'll just kind of hammer them out, and then we can start trying to get this axle out. Alright, then I'm going to grab a punch to get it out the rest of the way. Alright, so now I've got everything out, and we should be able to take this axle nut off. And kind of separate the knuckle from the strut. See if we can't push this CV through here. Pretty close. There we go. Now the inner should be a little bit easier to pull out now. I think we're gonna have to, there we go. Oh, I pulled the whole sucker off. Well, we can see obviously that this thing was the problem because this here is broken. And we got this just freely in there. And that seems like the source of our noise there. This guy was very loose. You can see this one's a little bit tighter there. This one's got some play. I'm gonna have to knock this side off from the inside, which is how you're supposed to take it off anyway, but wanted to give it a tug, and you can see this thing just totally came apart, and it's pretty wore out. Yeah, this one's you only have one that's actually doesn't have a ton of play in it, and these are just falling apart and all bent. So yeah, good thing we're getting this replaced before this thing totally just fell apart on us. So there's a closer look at the inner part of the old CV axle. I'm gonna have to knock it out from the back. You can see it's made a mess all in here, but there's a little bit of room here between the bearing from the inner shaft, and then I'm just gonna get right in behind here and try to knock it out with the hammer. It's a tight squeeze. So we got the inner part of the CV axle out. I just had to grab a bigger hammer and knocked it out right through there. Take a look at where it goes. There's the inner shaft there. You can see that little retaining ring. So let's go ahead and start getting the new one on. Here's our two axles side by side. I'm gonna put a little grease just on the splines on the inner and outer side, just to make that last a little bit longer and not get corroded in there. Now we got that greased up on both sides, I'm gonna try to do this in reverse order. There we go. Get the splines all lined up. There we go. So the issue I'm running into now, besides these cheap gloves, I'm running into this guy is keeping me from lining this up properly. And you can take that off, and it's probably recommended, but I was hoping to try to do it without it, so I'm going to keep fighting with it a little bit, and then we may end up having to take that off. Just as I was hoping, you can get the knuckle back into the strut without disconnecting the anti-sway bar end link, but it would be a little easier if you took it off. I just took it off last time when I put the leveling kit on, which I have a video about if you're interested, and it did not want to go back on very easily, so I was hoping to do it without. But basically there's like a Allen key here, and then a nut. You can hold this from spinning because it just free spins. It's just like a joint, and then or you can hold it on the back with like an adjustable wrench. But I didn't want to mess with that today, and I was able to get it back into place, so I'm going to continue trying to get this reassembled here.
Alright,
Take it easy, boss.
you too now. Be safe.
I'll try. This top one's always fun. Once you put the leveling kit on here, it's kind of stretched out, and it makes this thing really a pain to get in the right position. Alright, we finally got that bolt in, and I'm going to start tightening everything down. Alright, got the spindle attached to the strut again. Now we're going to throw this ABS sensor back in. Alright, got that guy in place, and we can start putting the brake back together here. Rotor first. I'm gonna put this axle nut on here. And we'll put the brake caliper back on. Take a look at our pads. Looking pretty new still. Hasn't been long since I replaced those. And then you're going to want to put some Loctite on these caliper bolts. So that's pretty important. So I've got this big center nut here torqued to 220 foot-pounds. Got these guys torqued down, caliper reinstalled, ABS wire reconnected, everything's routed properly. You want your brake line to be sitting in here, but because of this leveling kit, I've got it loose just to have a little bit more room. Right now it's at max travel because it's on the lift and there's no weight on it, but with this installed, this was putting too much weight there, so I've got that loose here, and I was chafing a little bit, so I've got some tape to make sure it doesn't rub through the line there. But if you want to take a look at how I put this leveling kit on, I have a video about that, and also a video about changing my tie rod ends. As you can see here, these are new. I had an issue with that, but let's move on. I'm going to go ahead and rotate the tires and change the oil. Alright, first time driving it with the new CV axle. Let's see if that fixed our problem. I've got no vibration and pulling or jerking with the acceleration now. I'm getting a little noise from my tires as I just rotated them and put some air in them, so they sound a little louder with these trail grapplers. But I'm pretty happy with that. That was a quick fix. A little bit of a hassle to replace that axle, but you know, just took me a couple hours, and I also got the oil changed and tires rotated while I was at it, so pretty successful, I'd say. But yeah, so if you're having issues with your steering, especially on an 05 Ford Escape or something similar like that, check out my other video where I diagnosed my tie rods that were bad and replaced them. So once the steering was fixed, I called it good and drove it to North Carolina. Had no issues the way there. Between the mountain roads and the constant turning and braking and engine braking on the mountains there, I ended up wearing out the CV axle, and I honestly think it kind of all goes back to, if you saw my other video, my wife drove this car in a flood in downtown Mobile, Alabama, when it had rained and just kind of flash flood while she was down there for an appointment. She decided to drive through the water, and she hit something, and it messed up her steering, and it also messed up the CV axle on that side later down the road. So I'm not surprised that it went bad, and as you can see, it was slinging grease. That's a good indication that your boot is ripped, and once you get the grease out of there or you get dirt inside there, the CV axle is not going to last long. So I'm going to let you guys know if I have any more updates on this car, but it's been like one thing after another ever since she drove it through the water. Luckily it hasn't had any electrical issues yet, knock on wood, but I think we got the steering right now. Thanks for watching.